To the members of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard, the armed forces, and all of the police, I say tonight that you must lay down your weapons and have complete immunity, or, in the alternative, face certain death. So, lay down your arms. You will be treated fairly with total immunity, or you will face certain death. Finally, to the great...
Trump's warning came true the night America and Israel changed the Middle East forever. He said it once, quietly, from the Oval Office. 5 words. There won't be anything left. Nobody took it seriously. Analysts said it was bluster. Diplomats called it posturing. The world moved on. Then, on the night of February 28, 2026, those 5 words became a prophecy. Because on that night, something happened that no one in living memory had witnessed. The United States and Israel, together, launched one of the largest coordinated military operations since the 2003 invasion of Iraq. They struck the heart of Iran. They killed its supreme leader. And they told the world, this is not over. So how did we get here? What warning signs did the world ignore? And what happens next? Not just for Iran, but for the entire Middle East, and for you. Stay with me, because this story starts long before the bombs fell. It was a cold February morning in 2025 when Donald Trump sat in the Oval Office and signed an executive order. The order had a clinical name, a restoration of the maximum pressure campaign against Tehran. But what Trump said while signing it was anything but clinical. A reporter asked him a blunt question. What would happen if Iran managed to assassinate him? Trump didn't pause. He didn't reach for diplomatic language. He looked straight ahead and said, that would be a terrible thing for them to do. Not because of me. If they did that, they would be obliterated. That would be the end. I've left instructions. He then added almost casually, there won't be anything left. At the time, most headlines treated it as Trump being Trump, dramatic, provocative, designed to grab attention. But those of us watching the Middle East closely saw something different. We saw a man who had already made up his mind and was telling you exactly what he intended to do. And before we go any further, here's a question for you. In what month and year did Trump restore the maximum pressure campaign against Iran for the second time? Drop your answer in the comments. I'll pin the first correct one. To understand why Trump's words carried such weight, you need to understand the Iran that existed before the bombs fell. For decades, the Islamic Republic had built what military strategists call an axis of resistance, a web of proxy forces stretching from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean Sea. Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza, the Houthis in Yemen, Shia militias in Iraq. Iran didn't just sponsor terrorism, it had turned terrorism into a foreign policy instrument of breathtaking precision and reach. And at the center of that web sat one man, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, supreme leader of Iran since 1989, a man who had outlasted 8 American presidents, a man who had survived sanctions, assassinations of his generals, and 2 wars fought in his backyard. He had watched the United States blink before. He had watched President Obama negotiate the 2015 nuclear deal, a deal that Iran publicly accepted while privately continuing to expand its enrichment program. He had watched Trump withdraw from that deal in 2018 and then not strike Iran despite repeated provocations. He had watched Biden attempt diplomacy that went nowhere. Khamenei, by early 2026, had reason to believe that America's red lines were negotiable. He was about to learn otherwise. The turning point that most Western media underreported began in late December 2025. Iran exploded from within. Massive nationwide protests, the largest since the 1979 Islamic Revolution, tore through more than 100 cities. The trigger was economic. The Iranian rial had collapsed. Inflation was crushing ordinary families. People couldn't afford bread. And this time, unlike the 2009 Green Movement or the 2022 Women, Life, Freedom uprising, the crowds weren't just asking for reform. They were calling for the end of the regime itself. The government's response was savage. On January 8th and 10th of 2026, security forces opened fire on demonstrators in what human rights groups described as a massacre. Khamenei personally authorized the crackdowns. Thousands were killed. Thousands more were arrested. And the world watched. Trump watched too. On January 13th, he posted a message to the Iranian people. Keep protesting. Take over your institutions. Help is on its way. That phrase, help is on its way, was not idle rhetoric. The American military was already moving. On January 23rd, Trump announced that a U.S. armada was heading to the Middle East. And here's a question I want you to think about. What was the name of the American aircraft carrier leading that armada into the region? If you know it, put it in the comments right now. The answer is the USS Abraham Lincoln, and it was accompanied by guided missile destroyers and followed days later by the USS Gerald Ford, redirected from NATO operations in the Atlantic. By mid-February, the U.S. military buildup in the region was being described by analysts as the largest since the invasion of Iraq in 2003. Khamenei reportedly moved into a reinforced bunker beneath Tehran. He could feel it coming. Now, here's where the story gets complicated and where historians will debate for decades. Even as the military was moving into position, diplomacy was technically still alive. On February 6, 2026, the United States and Iran held indirect nuclear negotiations in Muscat, Oman, mediated by Oman's foreign minister, Badr al-Busaidi. The talks were described publicly as a good start. Both sides agreed to continue. A second round was scheduled in Geneva for February 17th. A third round took place on February 26th. At the center of the dispute were three American demands. Iran must permanently end all uranium enrichment. Iran must impose strict limits on its ballistic missile program. And Iran must completely halt all financial and military support for proxy groups like Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthis. Iran's response, even in the final days, was that it would be willing to negotiate, but not capitulate. Iranian hardliners publicly called the talks a humiliation, and even as negotiators were sitting across from each other in Geneva, something alarming was happening on the sidelines. Reports surfaced on February 24th that Iranian military officials were finalizing a deal to acquire CM-302 anti-cruise missiles from China. These are weapons specifically designed to threaten U.S. naval forces. Acquiring them while simultaneously sitting at a negotiating table, that told Washington everything they needed to know. 2 days before the talks collapsed, Trump addressed the nation at the State of the Union. His language was stark. He accused Iran of reviving efforts to build nuclear weapons. He described those ambitions as sinister. He warned that Iran was developing advanced missile capabilities that could one day threaten American cities. His envoy, Steve Witkoff, had already said publicly that Iran was probably a week away from having industrial-grade bomb-making material. On February 20th, Trump issued a 10-day ultimatum. The clock started ticking. On February 26th, the same day as the third round of talks, Oman's foreign minister emerged from the room and told the world there had been a breakthrough. Iran had apparently agreed to never stockpile uranium enrichment and to allow full verification by the IAEA. Trump's response? He was not thrilled. He had already made his decision. 2 days later, the bombs fell. February 28th, 2026, 7:30 a.m. Greenwich Mean Time. Trump posted on Truth Social the United States had launched a large-scale military campaign to destroy Iran's missile industry, naval forces, and nuclear capabilities. The operation had two names, and this is your next trivia question. The Americans had a name for this operation, and the Israelis had a name for it too. Two different names for the same night of fire. Do you know what they were? Drop both in the comments. The Americans called it Operation Epic Fury. The Israelis called it Operation Roaring Lion. Both were designed to say the same thing. This is not a warning. This is the end. The scale of what happened in the next few hours is almost impossible to overstate. The combined U.S.-Israel force conducted close to 900 strikes. The Israeli Defense Forces claimed they had struck at least 500 Iranian targets. Tomahawk missiles, F-18 and F-35 fighter jets, and for the first time in combat, single-use drones were all deployed simultaneously. Targets across Iran lit up. Isfahan, Karaj, Kermanshah, Qom, Tabriz, military sites, command centers, missile facilities, nuclear infrastructure, all struck within hours of each other in a coordinated attack of breathtaking precision. But the most significant strike of all came in downtown Tehran. Intelligence agencies had spent months tracking one man. The CIA had been watching his movements, his patterns, his security arrangements. When senior Iranian security leaders gathered at a compound in the center of the capital, the Americans and Israelis knew. They struck. At 1:30 a.m. on March 1, 2026, Iranian state media confirmed what the world had been waiting to hear. Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, the 86-year-old supreme leader who had ruled Iran with an iron fist for 37 years, was dead. The reaction inside Iran was unlike anything the world had ever seen from that country. In some neighborhoods there was mourning. Crowds gathered, some weeping, some holding pictures of Khamenei declaring him a martyr. In other neighborhoods, and this is what shocked the world, there was celebration. Footage emerged of Iranians dancing in the streets, honking cars, fireworks. People who had spent decades living under the Islamic Republic's oppressive thumb, who had watched their friends and family shot in the streets just weeks earlier, they were not grieving.